First, some introduction. So Seth Gabhart is the Director of Community Development. He's been on for a few seasons now, and he's really coming into the role great. He's my right hand, and Seth and I talk almost daily and work together on things in Carlton Landing that connect the development entity, which is Humphreys Partners 2009, to other entities like the foundation, the association, the town, different operating businesses that we have. Jim Hasenbeck is our town architect. Come on in. And the town architect's role is to be in charge of design review and architectural and urbanistic design direction. And Jim has been involved in the community since before there was a Carlton Landing or even an idea of Carlton Landing. I got connected with Jim. What I'll do is I'll let each of them tell you a little bit about their own bio, and so they'll share their background. But Jim's been connected with us since 2006. Well, I've known you since the 90s, but in this respect, since 2006. And then Tom Lowe is with us today, and Tom is from Charlotte, North Carolina. I got introduced to Tom in 2008 when we did the original design charrette. We'll tell you what that process is, what a charrette means, if that's a new word for you. But Tom was with DPZ for 23 years, and the way that it would work is we'd go through a design process, and an architect named Andreas Duany, who was voted one of the most influential design thinkers of the last century. He would be involved at a high level and lay out the master plan and put it together. And then he had a team that had a very interesting, it was almost militaristic in the way that it was structured, of delegating authority into specific areas and letting technical specialists and the planning side put together specific plans and then knitting those together like a patchwork quilt to form a master plan really effectively. Morning. If you guys want to sit over here, you won't be in the sun. It's going to be really bright right there. Come on, Casey. You're good. You're good. But Andreas would drive the ship. He was kind of the master and commander. And then Tom would he was Andreas's right hand that would put these pieces together. Tom has been involved with the master plan for Carlton Landing more than any other one individual person, and consistently over the years. And so Tom and I have had a chance to work together consistently for the last 15, 16 years. So let Seth tell you a little bit about him. We'll just go down the row and let you tell them just a minute or two on your backgrounds, and then we'll go into the Q&A process.
Yeah, so my name's Seth Gephardt. As Grant said, I'm the Director of Community Development in Carlton Landing. Whenever we started looking at the Master Plan Speaker Series, ultimately we wanted to create an event that was informative for people to learn more about Carlton Landing. And so, Grant, if you were here in November of last year, he talked a little bit about the core values of Carlton Landing, and he went through the history, and he talked some about where we're going. And so today, as Grant was just explaining, we're really going to dive into new urbanism in particular. So we're going to have Grant, Tom, and Jim, who all have been a part of Carlton for a long time, share a bit about the design process back in the day and then where we're going. And so, as Grant said, we have Q&A for the next 45 minutes, and then after that, we're going to open it up to you guys. And if you have questions, you guys can ask questions as well, and we'll go from there. So to kick it off.
And let Jim and Tom tell their background.
Yeah, Jim, you want to share your background a little bit?
Sure. My name is Jim Hasenbeck. I'm an architect in Oklahoma City. And I'm born, bred, raised in Oklahoma, so I'm an Oklahoma guy. I love Oklahoma for a whole lot of reasons. But I think my main role was to put those two together, because I took Grant and his father, Kirk, who's here somewhere. There's Kirk. We went down and I introduced them to Andreas in Miami, Florida. And that's probably my largest role here, is just getting those two entities together. I serve as the town architect, so I review pretty much anything that's vertical out of the ground, a fence, a fireplace, a house. If you're pouring concrete, then we're going to go through design review. So that's a quick snippet. We'll get a little more detailed here in just a minute.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just for the digital audience,
Oh, okay.
the masses.
So, so I'm Tom Lowe, and I grew up in Virginia, and I live in Charlotte now. And so, a little bit of a story. I started off as a young idealistic architect. You know, went to architecture school, and then got a job working in a corporate office. And we were doing these big master plans. And I would do all this stuff using the current zoning, you know, the kind of suburban zoning. And I kept looking at these places and going like, wow, I really don't want to live in any of these places. I mean, and I was just designing buildings that were plopped down in the middle of parking lots, you know, along big highways. And I was just like, you know, I looked around after 10 years of that. I looked around and I said, there's got to be a better way, kind of like you are, like, there's got to be a better place to live. And like, there's got to be a better way to design places. And I discovered the work of Andres Duany and Elizabeth Plater-Zyberg, which were these two young, hip architects down in Miami that started a new graduate program to design new traditional neighborhoods and towns. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I just like, my wife and I just like changed our lives, moved down there, jumped into it. And that was a long time ago, you know, hit the ground running. And for at least the last 3 decades, that's very much what I've been doing. And I love coming to places like this. And I come and I go, wow, I'd really like to live here. You know, it's like you all. And this is one of the best that you'll see anywhere. So it's really glad to be here. Thank you, Grant and the Humphreys family, for inviting me.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jim. Grant, you know, the first question here, thinking about, you know, the early vision of Carlton Landing, whenever you guys got together for the original charrette, what were you guys thinking and what was the plan in those early days?
So I'll go back to 2007. My dad, Kirk, had bought a large swath of land where we are today, and under contract in some, and had closed on quite a bit of it. Not with the plan of doing Carlton Landing. At first, the idea was we love that part of the lake. As a child, I learned how to ski out on this cove when I was 4 years old. So that was almost 45 years ago. And so our family had had strong ties to Oklahoma, or to Eufaula, since 1972. Yeah, 70. So we've been coming here for a long, long time. But the land was just acquired in the early 2000s. And Dad and I were driving on the road. If you're coming down on the entrance drive and you turn on the farm, at the farm road where there's a construction road that comes to the east, I remember driving down that gravel road, and I said, Dad, and he was thinking about a land investment that could be parceled off and sold off at a good rate of return. He was looking for a place for a grass landing strip for his airplane. And I said, you know, Dad, I think we could do more. I think we could do something that is really compelling. And the idea was we'd been to Seaside, we'd been to Rosemary Beach, these towns in the Florida Panhandle that were really magical, just loved going there for vacation. But it was a 16-hour drive to get all the way out there and back. 16 hours there, 16 hours back, sleep in Jackson, Mississippi. I'd done it many times. And I just thought, could we bring that concept inland to a lake environment and do an Oklahoma version of that? Different economic profile. We see homes in Carlton Landing as growing in value, and certainly the price per square foot's, you know, strong. The appreciation rate's been strong, but we're 1/4 the cost per square foot, 1/4 or 1/5 of the cost today of Seaside and Rosemary Beach. They're about $1,700 a foot today. At that time, they were $650 a square foot. And so the idea is, could we bring that concept with the economic strength that you see in the coast, could we bring that inland? And we looked around and were surprised to see I did not find any examples of new urbanism at scale that was not either within 30 miles of the coast or in the major direction of growth for a large metropolitan area. So you could see projects like Stapleton was in Denver. There's a project called Newtown St. Charles, which was in the growth pattern of St. Louis. or they were in proximity to places like Atlanta. But to come inland into a rural area, we didn't see that as a precedent. I'll give it. One of the challenges today is all the answers need to be 30 minutes, and we need to keep them down to 90 seconds.
I got a good job.
Yeah. So yeah, you're gonna have to have the gong or the hook. So what we did is we took a regional approach, and we looked and we said, this part of the country doesn't have a great weekend destination option. Let's look around, and in a 3.5-hour drive radius from where we are today, there's 15 million people. At that time, there was 15. Today, there's more that are underserved with a weekend destination option. So let's look at that large-scale play and see if we can change the vacationing and leisure patterns for this region of the country.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Grant. So, you mentioned new urbanism and the idea of new urbanism. Tom, given your background, do you mind explaining just a little bit about new urbanism and what that is, that term? I know some people may be familiar with it, but others aren't.
Right. Well, as I mentioned before, there were suburban development and kind of the freedom of the car was a very liberating thing, but there were all these unintended consequences that came out of it that we didn't realize back in the 1950s, which kept growing and becoming more problematic. Traffic congestion, pollution. We were making our cars happy, but not necessarily making ourselves happy. And so this was kind of the pendulum swinging back, where we kind of forgot how to make walkable traditional towns. And so we had to kind of, and there was interest in that because a lot of older places were very, very popular and successful. Just no one was doing them today or at that time. And so we, so basically, a group of us, starting off with Andres and Liz and maybe a half dozen others, that were doing kind of this idea independently, decided to come together and form an alliance and say, there's more strength in creating a coalition.
That's all right. Just put it in.
Oops. You must be strong.
No. Are you around today? I'll catch you afterwards. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So anyway, so basically they said, we got to come up with a name. And at that point, traditional neighborhood design was the idea, but there was kind of a West Coast contingency that, California is not traditional. So we kind of settled on this name called New Urbanism, which is basically old urbanism. And that became kind of this coalition that ultimately formed what is called a Congress. It's like an organization, a large international organization called the Congress for New Urbanism. And then it was then we wrote a charter with a series of principles at the region, the city scale, the neighborhood scale, and the street, block, and lot scale. And all these things started happening and getting organized. And then that really took off. And then we said, now we've got to change the zoning, because the zoning is in the way. All the rules, we're breaking all the rules. We can't design traditional neighborhoods anymore because the rules were all about making cars happy. So we started working on zoning and came up with a new format called form-based codes. Now, that started 30 years ago, back in the 1980s or so. And so now, all the municipalities have adopted, or in the process of adopting, these types of form-based standards, because everybody realizes this is actually a better model. It's recovering the things that made quality of life great for people, and letting us use our cars, but not making the cars more happy than we are. So.
Oh, that's great, Tom. Thank you. So switching gears a little bit, but also on the same topic, you explained some about the planning principles. Jim Hasenbeck, do you mind explaining just a bit about the architecture in Carlton Landing and how that impacts new urbanism?
Sure. Carlton, the reason I told you I was Oklahoma born and bred is my family they homesteaded and went through the land run, and my dad was born in a farmhouse and all of this. So when we were working on Carlton Landing's town planning charrette, I, as an architect, were thinking a little bit more about what does Carlton Landing architecturally, what does Carlton Landing want to be? And I think most of you in here know the history of Oklahoma, the land run days and all of that. Well, that brought in a lot of people from a lot of places. So we're a melting pot of people in Oklahoma. Um, a lot of European influence. My family was German. And as I sat and thought about the farmhouse, my grandparents' farmhouse, and the beauty of those farmhouses, Gothic architecture kind of came to mind. Well, Gothic to me is also very much related to the Renaissance. And the Renaissance, for me, at least architecturally, I think of Florence, Italy. It's in Europe. So I started kind of thinking about putting those things together. So a lot of our civic buildings, I'll call them, the tower at the entry, Pavilion Park, the boardwalk pool, you'll notice it has a pointed arch as a Gothic arch. So you'll notice that Gothic arch. It's also very spiritual. When the rebirth, I call it the rebirth, happened in the Renaissance period, Michelangelo, Brunelleschi, those people, the churches got a lot taller. They started reaching upward. And to me, this is a new town. It's a rebirth of spirit. God is in there for sure. And then the farmhouse. So I started playing with the idea that our civic structures might have a little more of the European influence, the Gothic look. So you'll notice timber structure, which is like carpenter Gothic. You know, you take a board and you put boards together. That's where the carpenter part comes. And the use of slate, the slate look on the little towers you see on the different buildings. Again, the Gothic arch, that's kind of that European melting pot representation of Oklahoma's melting pot. And then the houses themselves are based more on the massing of a farmhouse, which have porches and really blend well with the new urbanist concepts that were being developed at the same time for Carlton Landing as far as walkable neighborhoods, meet your neighbor. We have sidewalks with porches, and the public part of a house is normally towards the front. The private part of a house, the bedrooms and things, are towards the back. So that's a little bit of a quick snippet of how the architecture was kind of thought through.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in 2009, we pulled together 4 or 5 Oklahoma architects and 4 or 5 national architects from different parts of the country who had great experience in new urbanism. And we asked them, we said, let's put together an architectural language. Jim led that charrette process and brought together the Oklahoma architects. The thing that connected with me is if you're from Oklahoma and your family's been here for a while, it goes back to a family farm. So it connects to the heart of the family story. So you can think, and immediately you're going back to grandma's house. You're going back to your upbringing. So it connects with childhood. It connects with a family heritage. It connects with multi-generations. And in our case, my great-grandmother lived to be 106. She came to Oklahoma in one of the last rounds of the land allotments, land runs in the 1890s. Her story is incredible. She came on a covered wagon, right, into Cotton County.
They rode a train, then they rode a covered wagon and take her brother to OSU.
There you go. There you go.
I knew there was.
Okay.
Family I like.
This has been going on for a long time. But here's the deal.
There's blood in you, whether you want to admit it or not.
If you're from Oklahoma, the stories like that, so each family has their stories, that folklore, the heritage talk. And when we talk about that, we romanticize the grit of the early pioneers. It was really hard. Why do we romanticize it? Because we're proud of what they endured. We're proud of what they overcame. And we find a lot of our own grit and drive in their stories. So that type of back to the farm and American farmhouse really connects at a deep level in terms of the identity of people. And I was like, man, what's a better core value and heritage DNA than going with something that reminds people of their heritage,
Yeah, Grant, Tom, on that note, so can you share a little bit about the architecture and how it meets up with the street, the porch, the front porch idea, and how that architecture really supports new urbanism, because you have these great planning principles, and then how the great architecture also plays off of that. That'd be good to hear.
Right. So there are some core principles. Actually, I pulled them up. They're about maybe a dozen that you all live.
There's a lot of
And
Give us a couple.
and usually I'm a person that likes diagrams and drawings, so I usually have something I point to. But you all know this place so well, you can immediately relate to when I say things like, usually the neighborhood has a kind of a center. There's a there, and you're like, yeah, it does. And actually, there are multiple centers here, and then there are also a much wider variety of dwellings compared to, say, a cookie cutter subdivision where everything's the same size. You have small houses, large houses. That represents different lifestyles for different people, different families, different times in your life cycles. And when you say retire, you don't have to like leave the neighborhood and move into a retirement center. It's all here. Or when you're a young family, free range kids are running around everywhere. So those types of things, it's a life cycle. It's much more holistic that way. And usually there's mixed use where you can get things or gather. Wonderful newest church, and shops and hangouts. We call them third places. Everybody needs a third place besides work and home to help get them through the day. Just hanging out, like the meeting house. And then there's a school which kids can walk to versus being, chauffeured by their parents or riding a bus, that kind of thing. Usually a lot of kids, in this case, it's kind of a resort village, but there are kids that do walk to school and some come in from outside. And then also the scale of everything is human scale versus car scale. And, people say, oh, it's like, I can't, get anywhere really fast in my car. And we're like, yeah, that's the point. It's called traffic calming. There's the pedestrians, and so when and you say, well, yeah, it's really comfortable for us to walk around in. And also the way the architecture is positioned, the garages are in the back. So your car is easy to get to, but it's not, the first thing you step out your front door into a parking lot. So that's something else. Also, the buildings are pulled closer to the street, and then also they're programmed with social interaction spaces, which that's that's the technical term, but the real term is a front porch, and basically means it's basically a way to get to know your neighbor, and it's good as a hierarchy because also it's kind of a controlling factor. It's like the public realm is the street and the sidewalk. The semi-public is kind of where the picket fence is in the front yard. The semi-private's the front porch, and then the private's inside the house. And then the rooms, like Jim said, the public rooms on the front, the private rooms on the back. There's a whole gradation of how you socially interact. It's very comfortable. You can ease in. When you want to, connect your neighbors, you sit on the front porch. And when you want to hang out in your bathrobe and barbecue, you go in your backyard, and you have those kind of outdoor spaces, public or private spaces that are very important in terms of just, enjoying life. And so, a couple more. The way that the neighborhood is arranged, obviously everything is in walking distance and or biking easily. And also the way that things are designed, what Jim referred to is, we call them vista points or terminated vistas. Basically, that they're things that help you with wayfinding, where you say, oh, there's a tower, I know which way I'm headed. In this case, the streets are oriented in some ways towards the lake. So there's the orientation things that help guide you through the neighborhood, even though you can get pretty lost if you kind of wander around enough. I love just kind of wandering around because you have all these different ways of getting from one point to the other. So that kind of connectivity, is kind of interesting. Like if you want to get from one side of the neighborhood to the other, there isn't just one way to get there. You can take, theoretically probably 100 different routes in and out of alleys and lanes and walks and stuff like that, which makes your day really wonderful because, the kind of variety, the choices you can make as you enjoy the neighborhood. So that gives you kind of an idea of what this is about.
Oh, that's great. So, we've heard a lot of really intentional ideas on how to make this place what it is. Digging into that more, Jim Hasenbeck, would you mind just sharing a little bit about the Architecture Design Committee and what its role is? If you've built a house or done anything with the built environment here, you know, they probably had to submit to design review. And so it's another intentional point. Would you mind sharing about that a little bit?
Sure. The Carlton Landing has a design review committee. Grant and I sit on that. Seth helps administer it for us. Carlton Landing has a building code. It's a form-based code, which is what Tom referred to. And I think Carlton Landing may be the very first town in the state of Oklahoma that has truly adopted a form-based code. So that's what this is. It has a companion. This kind of gives you the big picture: massing, porches, scale. The companion gets into the details. This is what the proportions of a window, columns, why we do things and why we shouldn't do things. This is a great book. And both of these make up Carlton Landing's design code. I think as a rule of thumb, anytime concrete is poured, whether it's a sidewalk, a fence post, a house, it needs to come to design review. The owners of Carlton Landing, when they purchase property here, they are made aware of these, or they should be made aware of these before they sign the contract. They know what they're signing up for. This is a very important process we go through. As Tom said, they're not all cookie cutter houses, so there's a lot of flexibility within the code, different scales, different massing, but there's a consistency in the style, the flavor, and the materials. I know a lot of you have been on college campuses. Some college campuses, you'll notice, have a palette of materials, and they stick with it and have for over 100 years. I went to Oklahoma State, and it has a very consistent feel, a contextual feel to it. And there's other universities that basically have a whole bunch of different types of buildings, and it's just their approach. So we want to make sure that Carlton Landing has a feel that's consistent, not just with the new urbanism, but also its architecture and its materials. And that's why you'll notice, again, the farmhouse massing and style. We do have what we call spice styles that we allow, like a Victorian or a craftsman style home. And you'll see some of those scattered around. But our base core vernacular is the massing of the American farmhouse. So the design review committee spends time, looks at plans, and just makes sure that they meet the code and that they meet the intent of kind of the architectural core values of the community.
Let me just speak on this just for a bit. Why do a master plan? Okay. The question is, why would you go through all that effort? I mean, we spent a lot of time and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on the planning process before we ever even broke ground for Carlton Landing. So why go through that process? When you have a vision, and in Carlton Landing, this is the DPZ book, and this is available, I think it's on Appfolio. And I would encourage anybody, if you haven't taken the time to flip through and go through the DPZ master plan for Carlton Landing, look at it. It's now 16 years old, and it is a living document, so it's something that we continue to fine-tune as we move forward. The last few days, Tom's been here, and we're focusing on 4 key areas, and we're saying let's really get into how the roads and the alleys and the lots are going to be configured, and how the parks are going to be configured, how homes are going to sit on the land. We're focusing on that, but it all fits within the general idea of the 2008 master plan. And we don't need to redo this. It's done. It's a great vision. It's guided us for 16 years. And when we as a town, when the town of Carlton Landing codified their municipal code in 2015 or so, I put together a requirement in the code that said the town acknowledges the tenets of new urbanism, of sustainable urbanism, the 2008 DPZ master plan, the living tradition. The town acknowledges all of that, and the code of Carlton Landing for the town of Carlton Landing is bound to these things. And so it's a long-term commitment to say, we're taking the private master plan that was created in 2008, and we're codifying it into what the Planning Commission is going to do, and Jim leads the Planning Commission, and what the town's going to support, and the direction for Carlton Landing for the long term. Why go through all that process? It gives one shared vision that everybody can rally around and say, yes, this is what we're buying into. It commits the developer forevermore to say, this is the direction, this is our true north, this is what we're going after. And that clarity provides enhanced property value appreciation and protection of investment. So as you come into Carlton Landing and you buy a house, you know that whatever happens 10 years from now, 5 blocks away, they're going to go through the same design review process according to the same principles. So you're not going to see a degradation of value or allowing subpar construction methodology or allowing a totally different direction that is not in keeping with the original vision. And that certainty, that clarity and that certainty allow people to have a lot of confidence about what's going to happen, not just next year, but 20 years, 30 years from now. One other thing that we're doing this week is taking a really close look, and this is our light imprint handbook, and I know you can't see this picture right here, but I would just say, when we get into a master plan section, Caleb, take a look at that. So each one of these little areas, which represents about a half of a block, about 3 or 4 lots, is a catchment area. And we're looking at how the stormwater is going to flow over that area and how we're going to manage stormwater. And we're still learning, and there's some ways that we can do a better job where we're seeing erosion continuing to happen. But if you're in other parts of the world where they don't take a real careful approach to stormwater management, your neighbor puts in a football field sized driveway and it all sheds onto your flower garden, and it creates a lot of conflict and discord within a community. And so that's part of the planning process, is not only dealing with the architectural vision and the urbanistic vision, but also the care and engineering of things like water running down the hill. So.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Grant. Tom, you're the master of light imprint. I think you wrote the book on it. You really did. And so, out of curiosity, do you mind just explaining a little?
Stealing it. I think there were a couple down.
Yeah, I know. I bought the book. Light imprint. Can you explain a little bit about what that is, and the beautiful water flow that we have in Carlton Landing? I love it. So I'd love to hear more about.
Okay, sure. So I mentioned earlier, this big coalition that was formed called the Congress for Urbanism, and this big movement, and everybody was like, trying to figure out stuff like zoning codes and architecture and street design. And one of the things that kind of kept popping up was civil engineering. And as it turns out, I come from 8 generations of civil engineers, old German engineers that, built railroads and bridges and that type of thing. And I'm kind of the renegade of the family because I'm a, architect and urban planner. But I have that kind of like engineering mind a little bit. And so here's what happened when we would design these beautiful master plans. We would, hand them over to the engineers, and engineers would say, well, we got to put in some big streets over here and that kind of thing. And that really wonderful town square that you designed, we're going to have to blow out one side of it and half the town square to put in a big retention basin, basically to collect all this water. And so there were a lot of projects that were destroyed, really. Kind of the soul was sucked out of them by the civil engineering requirements. And because there were suburban standards. And it's just simple things like, you've got to push your house back so we can build a retention basin. And well, I can't see my neighbors, or, that shopping center is behind this huge asteroid crater. I can't get to it by walking. The only way I can get to it is to drive around. There are things like that which really got in the way. So I said, well, let's be proactive. Let's think about engineering at the beginning, even though it's really boring. Who wants to talk about, things like, stormwater? But we came up with a whole handbook that's like a field guide on how to do engineering that lays lightly on the land and is at a scale that makes it compatible with walkability and all those tenets of new urbanism. And it took us a year and a half to put the book together. And one of the things I just wanted to mention to you all, because everybody's a homeowner here, some are business owners as well. Kind of the jingle is with rainwater, we call it rainwater. It's it's a good thing. It's not stormwater. It's not scary. Rainwater. You bring it down, you spread it around, you put it in the ground, and recharge your aquifers. That's generally how it works in most places. And basically, it's a good thing from a sustainability point of view. It's also, you can really reduce heavy duty infrastructure that engineers love to, charge you, gold plate things. You can do it very lightly, and you can work with the topography versus just, super grade everything. And it makes a huge difference in terms of just the character. The place you start is your own yard. You bring it down off the roof, you spread it around in your yard, let some of it go into the ground, and whatever's left over kind of moves forward. I think the reason why it keeps disappearing is because there are like over 70 different ways for you as homeowners to think about how your personal space can be the starting point to manage stormwater so it doesn't create all this erosion, which does happen because we let things surface flow versus putting it in big pipes under the ground. So you see water everywhere. And the other thing I say, another anecdotal thing about light imprint is like in suburbia, when it rains, all the kids go in and play video games, right? In places like Carlton Landing, when it rains, the kids get excited because they all, oh, the water's there. Let's get our little paper sailboats and run them down the street. They rock hop around and splash in the water. It's like when I grew up with mud puddles. I love mud puddles. So, it's like, it's a fun thing. And so the idea is that it's part of the design, part of the fun, part of the pleasure. So what's that?
It just worked into the master plan. So
yeah,
the master plan book has the light imprint as an appendix to the master plan.
Yeah.
And so you can look here as you're laying out your lot, or as you're looking at a new landscaping plan for a new home, and figure out how do we handle rainwater. And this gives tools in terms of paving, storage, channeling, and filtration. And so between those different elements, it's things that you might not think about a lot of times. A lot of times you just think landscaping should just kind of be low maintenance and it should just happen. But if you get the right thought pattern to approach not just the inside environment, the architecture of the home, but actually think about the created environment, including your interior space and the architecture, but also going into outdoor rooms all the way to the property line. The suburban mindset is to think about a home, and it's all confined within the walls of the home, and it sits in space on a lot that could be, a 5-acre lot, or it could be a 2-acre lot. And outside of the home is just the void. In new urbanism, what we want to think about is the whole property and creating really life-giving outside spaces in your yard and in your courtyard. So.
Tell about the time before you came here.
Yeah.
What we were doing as far as
yeah. So one time I was driving out. So if you're a developer, the Corps of Engineers is you have a lot of respect for the Corps of Engineers because they have absolute power. Anyone that's been around longer than the country has a lot of authority. And so Corps of Engineers was started by George Washington in the 1700s. I'm driving out on the entrance drive one time and I see a Corps of Engineers guy, and I think he was from the regulatory office, which are the ones with the hammer. They can really say thou shalt do this and you click your heels and do it. And he was looking at the stream across, when you're exiting out on the main entrance drive and it says area may flood or floodwaters beware. So he was looking at that, and it had been reported to him that we were creating flooding conditions for people downstream. And I'm like, we don't have any resort or reservoirs of water to create flooding conditions. Whatever flows onto our land flows off of our land, right? I said, but let me show you, if you'd like to come down and let us show you how we're handling rainwater management. And I brought him down and I showed him and I walked him through boardwalk. And I said, see the channels on the side? These are not concrete flumes. These are aggregate, natural, planted areas. And this whole boardwalk is really a rainwater garden. If you look at it, it's slowly saturating and soaking it up. And when it rains, it's even more beautiful because of how it goes. And I showed him the boulevard. And where there's less slope at the top block of the boulevard where I live, there's a grass swell and some stones that act as weirs as the water just slowly percolates across the boulevard. And then as it steepens up a little bit, like by the meeting house, we've got a concrete or not a concrete, a stone channel at the base of that. It's a little bit more erosion. And then that feeds in around Pavilion Park. And the swales around Pavilion Park actually act as to protect kids who are playing in the park from traffic. So we don't have to have a fence or a wall around Pavilion Park because we use the weir as the safety divide between cars and kids. So all this stuff, I mean, it all feeds together and then it continues to flow down to the lake. I showed that to him and he was blown away, and he said, could I bring hydrologists from the Corps of Engineers out to Carlton Landing to show them what you guys are doing here? And I said, we'd be honored. So we gave a tour of Corps of Engineers employees and hydrologists from a multi-state region to come here. Carlton Landing has actually, in all the sites from a light imprint standpoint, how does Carlton Landing rank up? How do we stack up in terms of light imprint?
It's a national exemplar. Yeah. People come here just to study how to do, stormwater management.
So the reason that Carlton Landing has set the standard, we're probably the best location for all of these tools being implemented in one spot in a kind of holistic way. The reason is not because other people wouldn't want to do it, or that because there's great advantages to doing it. It's that they can't legally do it. In their codes and their cities, they cannot legally do this to the extent that we have. We have the freedom to do this in our environment because we're able to write the code and to put it together, and we had the freedom. So we've been able to do a lot more than other places. So
That's great. A couple more questions here, and then we'll open up the Q&A for everybody. Can you talk a little bit about parking, Grant and Tom? And, we mentioned the vehicle and how it integrates with new urbanism. Speak to that a little bit, because we do live in a modern world that there's vehicles that people are in. And so talk about how you still maintain that pedestrian value while also.
So you're bringing up a topic that some people are, it's kind of queued up right now because we just put in place the association just released a parking policy, and everyone got invited in the last week or two to register your vehicles. And we're pretty independent minded here. And we've taken a laissez-faire approach to I've taken an approach that started, and instead of applying control and then having to let go of my grip because people were frustrated by it, I said, let's be open-handed about it and let things happen as they are. Let's watch and wait and see how this works. And when we see things break or, shake because it's not enough control, then we'll incrementally apply more controls. So that's the way I've taken for Carlton Landing. Outside of urbanism and architecture, we felt like we needed to lay that out clearly from the beginning. On things like parking, we've said, let's see how folks do. Now we're putting in place a parking enforcement process through the association so that people can be encouraged to park in a way that works for the whole community. As a society, especially since World War II, we've lost the common sense about parking to put cars in an appropriate space. And when you're in a close community where you're living closer together, you have to have more consideration for everything. Music, noise, activities, impact, and cars. So with the parking regs that we put together, we want to keep the cars behind the homes. We want to accommodate the vehicle without celebrating and prioritizing the vehicle. We want to leave space and make sure that it works best for pedestrians. And then after pedestrians, that it works best for people on like bikes and scooters and things like that. And then after that, then we want to come back. I would put golf carts quite a ways back in the line, near cars, because the reality is the parking impact and the vehicular impact is about the same with a golf cart as it is with a car. So golf carts in my book don't get just a hall pass and be treated like pedestrians. So we want to take care of the pedestrians first, and then we want to make sure that cars have their appropriate spot.
Is it a permit program then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's free, but you register,
Yeah.
but then there's actually enforcement if they're not parking.
So people come and says parking about permanent only. Is that kind of the whole
Yeah, so
idea?
visitors.
Yeah.
Hey, Grant, one
Yeah.
thing I think that we're learning, you don't go out and build a new town just every day. So we're all learning through this process.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's evolved here maybe more than we expected, which I think is a good thing. We have a lot more visitors or guests. In other words, we have rentals. And I think when you rent a house, it's different than if you live in a house. You know, my wife and I have a house that's got 3 bedrooms. Well, there's just 2 of them. We live in one of them. But when you rent it, now you've got people in each bedroom. Sometimes those people ride together. Sometimes they each bring their own car.
Yeah.
So I think the evolution of Carlton Landing, as it kind of goes through these, I'll call them growing pains, we have to somehow adapt to those. And I think that's part of how this has evolved, is these aren't 100% live-in full-time homes. There's a lot of rental property.
Yeah. So I've designed a lot of new urbanist type communities. Some of them are primary home neighborhoods, and then some of them are resort, properties. This is a resort town, and resort towns attract a lot of people, because you're on vacation. And typically, most of the resort towns really have to regulate parking more because you have so many people coming. And now you've got, like, I think I was hearing about this whole island of inflatables that's going to be, floating around in your lake. And that's going to attract, all sorts of people here. And basically you have to regulate the day trippers as well as, people that come on vacation, and every child and kid and grandparent drives their own car and 6 show up. They're all SUVs or trucks. What do you do with all of them? Well, you've got to regulate it because this is like a great place. Everyone wants to be here. And one of the famous Seaside, Florida, which is one of the kind of like the poster of new urbanism, the founder developer said, well, name one great place that doesn't have a parking problem. It's the miserable places that have too much parking. All those dead shopping malls. So that's the kind of thing. It's just part of the routine. On-street parking is great. It is another traffic calming device. I think one of my favorite streets is just right up that way. Which way is it? Is it Park Street? Because what we're doing is we're actually planting trees. Now we have a planting strip between the sidewalk and the street with trees in it. We also put trees between every other parking space, which is like trying to convince people to do that, like Department of Transportation. You can't do that, But to do it here, what we ended up doing, the outdoor room model, where visually you're looking at a neck down space as you're driving forward, you drive slower. That's proven, psychological. It's the same width lane, but you're actually driving slow and you're looking out for things. And we actually added that second layer of trees after Grant kind of first built it. He called me up and said, this street just feels too wide. The cars can go too, feel like they can drive fast. So we added those trees. So there are things like that Department of Transportation engineers don't think about, but we're thinking about, because we want to make this a really wonderful place for people.
So Park Street, where he's talking about, the curb to curb is 36 feet. The tree trunk to tree trunk is 24 feet. Okay, so it's a decrease, by 1/3. Imagine running on a basketball court, and you're running as fast as you can. You have space. It doesn't feel awkward. Now put yourself in a 5-foot wide hallway in a hotel and run that fast. It just feels wrong. Like, it feels dangerous. Something could happen. The door could open up and you could have a collision, right? The same things, I just thought of it. So the same is true with driving. The same is true with driving. Now, if you're my kids, when they were 5 years old, it feels normal, all right? They're just running down the hall.
Well, they're little.
That's right. But when you're driving in a car, we talk about what's the design speed for a street and or for a road. And when it's wide open like that, you have the freedom to hit the open road and speed up.
All right,
Last question.
rapid fire. Yeah, I got 2 more. So rapid fire here. Tom, 1 minute on what you would recommend for like those who are interested in learning more about new urbanism,
Sure.
Light Imprint, podcasts, books, and then
Well,
Grant,
everything's you can Google new urbanism on YouTube and watch lectures and all sorts of stuff. It's just too much. But Andres Duany is one of the most entertaining speakers you'll ever come across. So if you like to watch videos, they're on YouTube.
How do you spell?
Duany, Duany, and it rhymes with Swanee River, but it's spelled that way. Anyway, and there's a book called Suburban Nation: The Rise of Sprawl and the Decline of the American Dream. That's kind of like okay. And if you want to go back to a classic that was written in the 1960s, Jane Jacobs, The Death and Life of the Great American City. It's a great book. And then there's some others. There's some others that are good. There's one of my former partners with DPZ, Jeff Speck, who's kind of gone off. He's also gone off in his own career. Wrote one called The Walkable City, and has like little suggestions and ideas. He actually did a walkability plan for Tulsa and Oklahoma City too. Yeah. There's also this really great book called The Light Imprint Handbook. Okay. And if you're really thinking about, well, I got all this yard here, and I really like to create something that's fun, an outdoor room, but I also want to manage our stormwater, go ahead and get that. So, it's a good.
If you do that, it needs to go through design review, but we want to work with you to make it the best it can be.
Right. So anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, Grant. So future development, what do you got going on? Tell us a little bit about that. And we'll open up the Q&A.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute.
So what we're working on what we're working on right now is everything from here to the west up to the entrance road. So everything on the ridge and everything from the ridge up to the construction road. And that covers, probably about 500 acres, now about 400 acres of developable land. Additionally, we have a plan and have already had it platted that on the other side of the entrance road, where it's flat past the farm, we're going to be opening up that and bringing in some lots that bringing in a different product type. So we're looking at half-acre lots that are designed for a compound type structure where you could have a series of homes that front into a private courtyard environment. And so that'll be up on the top of the hill. And then back in the wooded area, as you're driving out to your left, we have about 400 acres there that is like rolling hills, thick woods. There's a great natural pond back there. I say it's not natural. It was bermed up decades ago, and it's been there for some time, and it's just fed by rainwater. Beautiful area. And so in that area, we call that the homestead, going back to, this idea of the culture of the farmhouse and homesteading. So this would be cabins in the woods that are where privacy is possible, but community is encouraged in the town center neighborhood. There, privacy is going to be a little bit easier to attain. Homes will be separated out more, so we're looking at acreages as much as 3 or 4 acres for a homestead area that can then be subdivided, and the owner can, build a home for their kids or for their friends or invite their neighbors and subdivide the land over time as they see fit. And so those are things that are on the plate for us right now.
What's upon us, Stevens Road and all of that, just real
Yeah,
quick.
and so then moving out to the north, they are just about done with an extension of Stevens Road, which is the section line right-of-way road that goes all the way up to Highway 9. We drove it the other day in a golf cart just to check out construction. They've got a little bit more work to do, and they've been waiting for the rain delays to stop so they could complete their work. But this is a major project that was done to DOT standards that was completed by the town of Carlton Landing using TIF dollars. So this is when you pay your property taxes, it goes through the county and comes back to the town of Carlton Landing and then gets to fund public amenity projects like that, which help open up public access to the new marina. And the Marina Center is continuing to grow, and we're also focusing on the town center right here.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's open it up to Q&A. If anybody has any questions. Yeah.
I have a vote right.
You're all good.
So sorry.
No, you're good.
I won't speak long. I would like to self-submit on whatever committees as a homeowner because I am disturbed by the rental situation.
Okay.
Jerry Cycle. And I'm particularly disturbed by what I find and I don't have a lake view at my house, so I considered that my lake view, and I was unable to sleep last night when I saw what had been dropped in. I don't understand it. Was that discussed, or did that just?
Yeah. So in the master plan, when we go back to, if you go back to 2013, we started discussions with the Corps of Engineers about the lease area. And this is the town of Carlton Landing that has a lease on 420 acres of federal land that surround Carlton Landing. So it's a long-term lease between the town and the Corps. And there's different elements of it. Like to the south, we have an area called the Nature Center. The Nature Center is where you're going to see more trails, outdoor learning classrooms for the school, outdoor wildlife exhibits. Over time, the vision of the Nature Center gets implemented and put together. To the east, we have this large area called Roundtree Landing, which is about 250 acres. So that's all the peninsula to the east. There we have trails, opportunities for cottages and glamping, camping, and a summer campsite. So that's all to the east. To the northeast, and I'll get to your question in a second. To the northeast is the marina area. And so that marina center, that goes on up there. And if you look in the core lease area, there is plenty of room where, I mean, an RV resort was discussed for the land to the north. Camping areas to the northeast were discussed. All of that's included in the core lease document. So was there a public meeting? Yes, there were a lot of public meetings 10 years ago when the core lease was put in place. It was managed by the Corps. It took 2 years. It required an act of Congress to actually get it completed. And it required an environmental impact study for all 800 miles of shoreline for Lake Eufaula. So it was a big push to get that piece done, which allowed us to have access to the lake. This cove right here, what we want this cove to be is to be, we called it the adventure zone. So this is a place where you can have low impact public recreation activities. And so we have tried to get the Corps of Engineers, we moved the boat docks out 2 years ago to the future location to get the boat traffic pushed onto the main part of the lake and reduce the boat traffic through this cove. We tried to get the Corps to allow us to restrict boats completely in this cove, making it safe for swimmers, for paddle boards and kayaks and things of that nature. We were unable to get that full restriction on boating, but we did say trolling motors only, I believe is where it is today. Is that correct?
Yep. That's
So
right.
we've got trolling motors only in this cove, and the inflatable aqua play zone, that's going to be great for kids. There's a lot of families that love it. I'm not saying that everybody is going to love it, so that's fine. You have your choice to love it or not, but there's a lot of places in different areas. We got 9 miles of shoreline, so there's a lot of areas where people can connect to the water in the way that they choose.
Right. I regret, and I do have to leave, that it's where the pool is, that's the pretty spot.
Yeah.
The rocking chairs
Yeah.
are the pretty spot.
So but I'd say the appropriate venue for that's with the town, because the town granted the concession agreement, and that's with a business owner that chose to do that, and it's in keeping with the master plan. Yeah.
That's the town meets every third Saturday of the month. This was voted on. It's not. It will be voted on again at some point. As a consolation, it's probably 3/4 of the year it's not going to be there. It's not there permanently. Yeah. So you do have a voice. But this isn't really the best spot for it. But we hear you, and yeah, every third Saturday of the month
At 8 a.m.
At 8 a.m. and you can sign up to speak. And,
yeah. Other questions? Any questions about new urbanism or the master plan?
Just to be clear, the town is the custodian of the core lease.
That's correct.
The
town is the lessee, yeah. And so what happens in the leased premises of the core lease in that 420 acres is all handled by what's called a concession agreement or concessionaire agreement. And that's what gives rights to private parties or businesses who want to operate a business within the core lease or make improvements within the core lease premises. Any other questions about new urbanism?
Yeah, I'll add to that too, though, really quickly, and we'll go. But yeah, the next master plan series I'm excited about because we're going to bring in the different entities, and so we're going to have someone from the town. We're going to talk about a little bit of the town's role in this, and then we're going to talk about the developer and the foundation, the association, so people can begin to understand like what are the different entities and what their roles serve in the community as a whole. And so I'm excited for that one too.
I'm just warning people, in the core lease presentation from 2013, it also included a climbing wall and a zip line. So that's not here yet. It could happen. Just warning you.
The next one will be later this summer, towards Labor Day.
Yeah, Chuck. Yeah, so the light imprint, and Seth, I'd ask you to confirm it. In this version, the final version, the light imprint document is attached as an appendix to the master plan. So it's back there in the back, and it's probably got 30 or 40 pages dedicated to it. So, Seth, if you could confirm that that's on there, that'd be great.
I sure
will.
will.
And it should be on AppFolio, so any Carlton Landing homeowner can log in, and then there's a library or a data room in AppFolio, and you can go to things where you see the declaration, you see policies that the associations put together. The town's policies are available on the town website. Yeah, and the form-based code from 2015 is all on the town's website as well as part of the 2015.
Light Imprint's a great book. It's like a kit of parts. There's like 70 or so different things you can do, and it's got just wonderful examples from big scale to little bitty small things. Even like a rain chain coming down to a pot full of rocks that slowly let water down.
Yeah.
Well, probably
a lot
so,
of the
yeah.
illustrations of actually what's been built. Tom designs he does beautiful drawings on what can be, but a lot of the developers, when they try to implement it, they run into the red tape of their municipalities. And so the built examples in Carlton Landing are some of the better ones that are completed. How are the seats doing? Are we past the point of comfort? There you go.
Well,
hey, thank you for coming today. Seth, thanks for moderating, and thank you all for coming. I hope you get to celebrate your moms this weekend, and appreciate you taking an hour out of your day here. Thanks a lot.